Good morning from Glasgow, everyone. Welcome to those attending our event in person and those following us online. My name is Agatha Meissner. I'm the Director of Generation Climate Europe, and I'm the moderator of today's session. In today's event, we'll discuss the potential of scaling up circular solutions to reach the 1.5-degree target. We'll hear from representatives from national governments, EU institutions, businesses, and youth organizations. This session is organized within the framework of the EU COP26 side events and EU Circle Talks, and brought to you by the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, EIT Climate Kick, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Finnish Innovation Fund Citra, Generation Climate Europe, Public Waste Agency of Flanders Ovum, and Director General of Environment of the European Commission. This is a hybrid discussion, therefore interventions will be delivered by our speakers both online and in person. In the first part of the event, you'll have a chance to hear amazing stories on the importance of circular economy for climate action. We'll then dive into a discussion on how to integrate circular economy solutions into national climate strategies and engage various stakeholders in the process. Let me now give a floor to Cillian Lohan for an introduction to our session. Cillian has been Vice President of the European Economic and Social Committee since October 2020. He was the inaugural chair of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Cillian, we would love to hear from you about Europe's effort in tackling climate change and the important role of the European Circular Economy Action Plan in making it happen. The floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Agatha. Good to see you there at COP. And thanks for the invite today. We've heard a lot about the challenges of this COP already, of the feeling of exclusion of certain voices, of the limitations of the commitments, of the disparity sometimes between the voices on the streets and the voices in the negotiations. And in my experience, it's these side events that really connect stakeholders and citizens with what is really happening on the ground and the climate negotiations. So climate talks and climate commitments can be, they can be vague, they can be nebulous at the best of times, and identifying practical actions that can be transformative are key. And that's where I see the huge added value in this session. In a broader sense, at the European Economic and Social Committee, we've called for a dramatic reduction in fossil fuel subsidies and a shift towards subsidizing the things that we want more of, namely renewable energy, which is really the ultimate source of circular power. In this session, I look forward to hearing from the speakers on other practical transformations in the circular economy space. And I'd urge you to check out the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform that Agatha's just mentioned, a joint initiative of the EESC and the European Commission, which is really a go-to space for circular economy, a platform for sharing experiences and knowledge, and a platform for identifying the gaps in the legislative framework that needs to be designed to empower stakeholder action and to drive transformation to this low carbon circular economy that we want. As we see from today's session, the role of youth is an essential element. At the EESC, we have taken a lead in this, establishing a regular roundtable for youth on climate and sustainability, putting youth advocates and activists face-to-face with European commissioners. And we've also added a youth delegate to our mission to COP. So together, I think we can make this transformation. Europe has taken a lead on circular economy, and we see that from the range of actions that have taken place and the range of stakeholders present today who are very active in this space. Circular economy is a practical means of taking the first steps that are needed to address our production and consumption excesses and malpractices. And I'm proud to be working in this space and to give these opening remarks for such an important session. I wish you really well for the session ahead, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you. Thank you very much, Agatha, and good luck for today.
Thank you so much, Cillian, and also for highlighting the role of youth in the circular economy transition. You will now hear amazing stories of actions and initiatives on the circular economy, the advanced climate action at the local, national, and international levels. Our first speaker is Mohamed Ridouani. Mohamed is the mayor of Leuven. He was the inspirer of Leuven 2030, a partnership where more than 600 companies, organizations, and citizens are united to turn Leuven into a sustainable and climate-neutral city. He will tell us about their actions and achievements for which Leuven was named the European Capital of Innovation by the European Commission 2020. Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning to you all. Thank you for having me. My greetings from Leuven, Belgium. So if we can start the presentation, then we'll walk you through our story about how we approach the climate story, and especially focused on the circularity. So in fact, basically what we do in Leuven is we go to the core of what we human beings are able to, and that is we are so good at collaborating. So let us not forget that. And in Leuven, we have forged actually an approach which we call an inclusive, innovative approach, where we bound all layers of society. You can see it here on the model. We call it the horizontal collaboration model, where we bring together our citizens with city leaders, academia, entrepreneurs, and in fact, we rally them around common ambitions. And common ambitions, well, the climate challenge is one of the major ones, but we have health issues, we tackle poverty issues, inequality, and we do that always in the same way, through a systemic collaboration and through bringing leadership together. Next, please. Surely the largest initiative in my city is Leuven 2030. Leuven 2030 is in fact an NGO, but it is also a governance model which we have created and established above all these city layers. The City Council has given away powers for climate policy to this organization, and there we work together with our university, with knowledge institutions, companies, so creative citizens, NGOs, name it, we bring them together, and we tackle, in fact, the climate challenge together. In Leuven, we do that now for years, and it has brought us good things. We do not operate in the dark. Leuven 2030, which is a quadruple helix model, as we call it, the real ecosystem, has drawn up what we call a roadmap, which is scientifically based and which sets out the road towards climate neutrality. In that roadmap, we have 13 large programs around renewable energy, around greening mobility, waste management, circularity, which I will be talking about, water management, how do we make our cities climate resilient, etc. So a very elaborate roadmap which tells us what to do, what will it cost, and what is the benefit. And as you can see, next please, in fact, all these partners, and it's more than 700 now that are in this organization, have committed with their action plans to make it happen, to make sure that all these actions in that roadmap are being carried out. And it's about empathetic leadership that is rallying around this common goal. And it's really marvelous to see that here when we signed the renewing of the commitment, that all these leaders said, yes, we will get it done and we will go for it. One of the most important approaches, as I said, programs is about circularity. This is what we are talking about. Circularity is about how we handle and how we consume materials. And if we look at the greenhouse emissions, you see that almost half of emissions come from how we consume materials. So in Leuven, through the roadmap, we've done a couple of things. I will name just a few of them. For example, we have a building materials platform where we use and reuse, in fact, materials coming from buildings. When you destruct them and reconstruct, it's about reusing and sharing. We turn waste of materials into resources. We have a beautiful project where we have people that are a bit far from the labor market. We skill them to, in fact, make sure that hard plastics is turned into park benches so that you can put in your public spaces. And in fact, it has become a standard by now. So you have waste management, and you have also labor programs. We have a repair platform, Leuven Fixes, where people come together and they repair stuff, they share information. All these programs are, again, in collaboration with a lot of partners like OVAM. OVAM is the Flemish department and specialist when it comes to waste management and processes, and it's with them that we do a lot of those things. In one of our iconic buildings in Leuven, you have what we call a make-learn space. There we bring people together that have bright ideas about how we can reuse materials, how we can make nice products out of them and have a market for that. And there we bringing together entrepreneurs, bright, creative people, young people, and that's where nice things happen. And I can continue like that for a long time. What is important is that these initiatives can take place, that they can experiment, that they can fail, try again. And when things work, you try to scale them up and you find partners that will implement them. So the last thing that I want to say is that next to doing things, we should monitor. We should see what works, what doesn't work. And we monitor a lot of things. So we monitor the CO2 impact of the materials. We monitor how they are reused, the flows, the demand. All of these things are being monitored and shared among people. This is one of the reasons that we were named the European Capital of Innovation. We were happy about that, but it's important that we keep on inspiring, especially young people, that we tell them that it is possible to change the way we live, that it is about a new lifestyle which we promote, and that there is behind that a good systematic collaborative approach to make that happen. And I'm happy that we can share that with you, and especially that we can learn from each other. And that's what we are good at in Europe. Let's continue doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, and also for it's really interesting to hear about buildings and built environments, since we are going to talk about this the second part of today's session in the panel discussion. So our second speaker is Jukka Kayan. Jukka is the Public Affairs Manager at Ratio, an international company specializing in healthy, responsibly produced food. Jukka will give us insights into plant-based foods as resource-smart choices, the circular solutions at factories, and the role of businesses in promoting a circular economy. Jukka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for this opportunity to join the event. Welcome to Finland, and obviously to our living room. My name is Jukka Kayan. I'm the Public Affairs Manager at Raisio. We at Raisio have about 400 employees in 10 countries and over 80-year history in turning Finnish ingredients to food that is healthy for the people and the planet. We have a strong presence in the milling industry, but lately we've been investing heavily also to plant-based foods. In the milling industry, our expertise is particularly in the oats and in the plant-based business, mainly in the fava beans. And with these products, we've become the domestic market leader in the category of alternative proteins. But we also invested heavily on a new production facility that produces oat milk and other non-dairy products from Finnish oats. When talking about circular economy, to me, in the very core of the concept is being resource smart, having more out of less. And this said, plant-based foods provides us great ground in producing food for human beings as efficiently as possible. We're able to produce our fava bean foods with less emissions, less land use, and less water. That is the convention in the modern Western food system. And when thinking of the resources, it just makes so much more sense to produce the ingredients that are nutrition rich and tasty directly to human beings without first producing them to feed. And when talking about circular economy at Raisio, I need to point one of the factories that we have here in Finland. The factory is the one where we produce the oats, and that is, the factory is carbon neutral, well, thanks to the oats themselves. There, at the factory area, there is an energy plant that utilizes the oat hulls, the stuff that is left out after the good stuff of the plant is being utilized. And that energy plant produces the energy, electricity, heating, and the industry steam that is needed at the plant or at the factory. And to me, this is just a magnificent example of circular economy. And particularly in the food industry, there is a lot of super cool opportunities available with these kind of circular energy solutions. The bio-waste the food companies have in their hands could actually solve many of the challenges the companies have in the very same hands. This said, I encourage the companies to take a closer look on what's happening there already in their processes, and thinking, could there be a way to do something differently? There's a lot of solutions out there, and where a lot of resources could be saved. Another example of a circular solutions that we have at Raisio comes from the factory where we produce the fava bean products. The cooling water system at the factory was built in a way such systems are built. One pipe comes in and the water cools what is needed to be cooled, and another pipe goes out. And after a while, one individual factory workers was taking a closer look at the system and thought that actually this could be done in a much more efficient way. And he put up a project with his colleagues and rethought the way the system works and applied a lot of circular thinking to it, adjusted the way the pipes went there. And as a result, we now use 70% less cooling water than what we did previously, and what is basically the industry standard. And yes, the saved water, it has some kind of environmental impact, just the water itself, but it also means that we need to use less energy when pumping the water. But when doing business, it's just clear that it's a great solution, as it saves tons of money to us. As a final remark, I want to address the responsibility that the companies have in putting circular solutions into practice. We as companies have great influence when scaling the circular methods and making them into standard solution, standard options when building up, let's say, factories for food production. The solutions, they are out there, and I'm thinking, who would then utilize the solutions if not us, the companies? Thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts on circular economy, and I wish the great session from now on as well.
Thank you very much, Jukka, for really sharing your insights on the role that businesses can play in creating those sustainable circular food systems. Our third speaker is Maire Tido. Maire is a project manager of the Circular Economy Sustainable Competences for Youth project. She'll provide us insights into the importance of engaging youth in the circular economy and also its role in climate education. Maire, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Agata, for the introduction. I want to start by saying that it's obvious that with circular economy, we need to change the way how we produce things, how we consume things, and how we think about things. For example, owning versus renting. So the young people here have a crucial role to play, because they have to kind of embrace the concept, be internalized with circular economy, and in a way skip the whole linear old ways of thinking. With the SESCI project, our central question has been, if we are today already equipping young people with the necessary knowledge and skills for circular economy, because they are going to be future leaders, future innovators, future state of heads, decision makers, etc. So we have mapped the status quo of circular economy in the partner countries of the project, which are Estonia, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Netherlands, and the European context. And current reality is really, really different. For example, in some countries, you can already study a whole curriculum about circular economy. And in others, there's maybe just one subject you can study, for example, in design or environmental studies. So it's not much. And that actually puts already the young people today in a very different starting position, where some are kind of entering the adulthood or the career or the labor market with this circular mindset, understanding why it's important, what it is. And then some have been still taught in this old way of linear thinking, where we have to then kind of, reskill them, change their mind shift to become more circular. The second thing what we have done is we have interviewed 50 circular companies in those partner countries. And our question was, what makes a circular entrepreneur, and what kind of skills and competences they have, and what their advice would be for the young people. And we learned that, first of all, when you want to be a circular entrepreneur, you really need to have a strong vision and personal ethics where it's kind of guiding you through the obstacles that are going to be on your way. Because let's be honest, currently there are a lot of obstacles you have to overcome. And then the vision is giving you strength to keep going. Secondly, it's really important to have actual circular economy knowledge as well. So only teaching it as one subject somewhere in like some exclusive studies is not doing the trick. And thirdly, what you need to run a business are soft skills like collaboration skills, cooperation, communication, systems thinking, which you might think that, okay, we need them also today in the linear economy. But putting all these things together, what makes a circular business is that you know also how to implement all this in a circular context. So the question is, are we preparing the young people today for circular economy? So yes, we are teaching some of them a thing or two about circular economy. Yes, we have youth workers who for decades have been equipping young people with soft skills through non-formal education and informal learning. But it's a big no, actually, because we are losing an opportunity to raise a generation and generations after the young people of today to be embracing the circular economy and find it as a norm, know what it is about, know how this influences their way of consuming, and how when they enter the labor market, that this is how they know that their careers are going to be all around circularity. And when we bring also into the equation the climate action, then actually there's also a huge impact where what young people can play. For example, on a personal level, consuming less, consuming products longer, repairing them, maintaining them, sharing them. But also on a societal level, young people could demand for better choices. They could demand for circular solutions and give a push also to the market, a signal to the market that we need the transition. And you know what? There's nothing more scarier to a business than knowing that next generation refuses to buy their products. So young people have a role to play. We with the SESCI project have already started educating young people on circular economy. And but obviously we are not enough. So to sum up what I've been saying, I want to encourage all of you in whatever roles you are to think how you can engage young people already today in the conversation to make them the catalysts that we desperately need for making circular economy happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mari, and really for highlighting also the point that at the core of circular economy transition, there's also the mindset change. And that's where both formal and non-formal education can play a really massive role. And a lot of youth organizations and young people are actually really, really active in bringing not only that more technical knowledge, but also the necessary soft skills in that transition. So let us now move on to Patricia Fortes. She's a researcher at Nova University in Portugal, working on energy systems transitions towards decarbonization. In her intervention, you'll hear a little bit more about Portugal's plan to integrate circular economy into the national long-term strategy. The floor is yours, Patricia.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction, and good morning from sunny Lisbon. So can you put the, thank you. So I will show you how we have estimated the role of circular economy for the 2050 carbon neutrality goal in Portugal, and how we integrated this circularity on the national long-term mitigation strategy. In the next slide, you can see the whole pipeline of approaches and tools that we have used to design the Portuguese carbon neutrality roadmap. And of course, don't have time to explain in detail, but I want to draw your attention to a specific thing: the role of stakeholders. In each of the different steps that you see, the people icon is where we had co-design another collaborative process with the national stakeholders. For example, they help us to design these 3 social economic scenarios for Portugal, where different scales of circularity rationale were involved. We had a more linear scenario and 2 scenarios with different scales of circularity. As you know, for example, the heart of the modeling tools are the modeling assumptions. And they help us to define for these modeling assumptions and link it to the circular economy rationale. We had a series of workshops with more than 150 national stakeholders with different fields of expertise. I will give you some examples in the next slides of the rationale. In the next slide, where we introduce some rational circular economy rationale and how we translated its modeling assumptions. For example, in terms of construction, which is quite ineffective in Portugal, we assume that in the future, taking into account circular economy, the construction sector must be more efficient management of the materials. New construction materials such as wood will have a major role. For example, construction and demolition waste can be incorporated in the construction side and also in the cement industry. Of course, in terms of modeling assumption, this will be translated in a reduction of the cement production, in a reduction of the clinker incorporation. We also assume that buildings will be more multifunction and shared, for example, in terms of service and in terms of equipment, not just for service, but also for households. And of course, this will lead to lower heating and cooling needs and lower equipment and more efficient. And of course, this has impact on the energy needs and the energy supply and consequently on the greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of mobility, for example, just to give you some brief examples, we are assuming a higher sharing systems, not just for passengers, but also for goods. And this, of course, will lead to higher occupancy rates and load factor for freight. And for example, this later one can counterbalance the increase of freight mobility that is expected in the future with inverse logistic linked to circular economy and higher digital markets. In the next slide, and one important thing that we have asked to stakeholders was how they think will be the food consumption habits, and they believe that in the future people will be more concerned with health, and they want healthier food, and they will want more local production. And of course, this will lead to a higher area of organic farming, a closed loop of the nutrients with less nitrogen fertilizers and more compost use, and of course with impacts on emissions. In the next slide, I give you some numbers. In the next slide, just some numbers of the potential of circular economy in terms of greenhouse gas reduction potential, comparing with the scenario where we're not assuming this circularity. And for example, for the forestry, and when you assume a more circular economy the impact on the forest will be a more efficient management of the forestry resources, will be a new bioeconomy, not just linked with the construction that I mentioned before, but also with other industrial sectors, and also in terms of value of ecosystems. And this leads to a more productive forest, will be to more diverse species, more resilient to forest fires, which, as you know, in Portugal is a huge threat, specific on the hot summers, which will increase with climate change. So when we assume all this circularity, we can have, for example, more 40% of the CO2 captured by the national forest when we don't compare with the scenario where we don't have this. And for example, the mobility that I have talked before, we can have up to minus 25% of greenhouse gas emission reduction due to circularity. And this I'm just talking about direct greenhouse gas emissions, because if we think about indirect emissions, this huge potential could be even higher, not just for Portugal, but for the whole Europe. And this is just some examples. And of course, if you want to know more details about it, you can talk to me and contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patricia, on sharing Portugal's plan to integrate circular economy into the national long-term strategy, and also really interesting to hear about the importance of engaging different stakeholders in the process and really bringing in different voices. And also thank you to all our speakers from the storytelling segment of our event. It was really, really interesting to hear those different perspectives and stories around that circular economy transition and its role in tackling the climate crisis. So let us now move on to the panel discussion, really exploring that incorporation of circular economy into climate strategies, and also really looking at this engagement of different stakeholders in the process. So we'll have two speakers joining in person and one speaker joining us online. Our first speaker is Andrea Pantarelli. Andrea is the Vice President of the Youth Express Network, which is a European network that works on youth social inclusion and empowerment. So welcome, Andrea. Really great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Agatha, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I am very proud to be here and very happy because I have the opportunity to represent a lot of people from Europe, a lot of young people from Europe. My name is Andrea, I'm 26, and I am the Vice President of Youth Express Network, this European network based in Strasbourg since 1993, that works on human rights, youth social inclusion, and youth social rights. This network is member of the European Youth Forum, this greater European forum, and is financed by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Commission, the European Youth Foundation, and from the municipality of Strasbourg. YAN is composed by 20 member organizations from all more or less the countries of the Council of Europe, namely 14 countries. In the framework of circular economy, Youth Express Network has been doing with other member organizations from Europe a long-term project called CEU. CEU is a long-term project that is a key EU2 partnership project, and this project has the aim to create and to foster a strong relationship between youth in Europe and local authorities. This is the main outcome of this project, but of course we also want to empower young people with the awareness about circular economy, what circular economy really is, which are the advantages that we can get from it. Advantages that are not only economic, but are also environmental, such as waste management, recycling, and so on. I want to thank the partners that has been working with YAN in this project, namely Pontidiscu from Wales, Active Citizen Partnership from Greece, then l'Ufficio Comune per la Sostenibilità Ambientale from Italy, the Center for Intercultural Dialogue from the Republic of North Macedonia, ACR Plus from Belgium. What is important in this project is to create a safe place for young people in order to exchange best practices, ideas, to find solutions in order to solve climate changes, of course, and climate challenges.
Sorry, could you wrap up?
Yeah, of course, sorry. The last part, we use a methodology in order to lead this project. The first one is understand who are the local norms and the local policies that we have in our countries if we want to work together. Then we have to understand who are the stakeholders, and then we have to understand how can we interact with them. We have to create a SWOT analysis with young people and environmental people that are able to have a better peer in this kind of field. And then we have to think about our object and to plan action that we have to implement in this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Our second speaker is Richard Boyd. So hello, Richard. Richard is a senior consultant at Arup, which is based in Berlin, where he uses circular economy principles to help designers, construction clients, and asset owners to decarbonize their projects and supply chains. So great to have you here, Richard.
Super. Thank you, Agatha. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone who's joining online. My name is Richard. I'm based with Arup in London. And today I'm also representing the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, one of the leading advocates of a circular economy transition based in the Isle of Wight in the UK. And part of the, what I want to sort of just open with is just to make it absolutely clear to everyone that as far as we see it, decarbonisation can only really be achieved if it's the ends that we're looking for. Circular economy is very much part of how we get there. And if we're thinking about how, in the context of COP, we want to adopt circular economy, embed circular economy into the decarbonisation policy framework, what we're really interested in is sort of starting to see the NDCs that countries are submitting, starting to acknowledge and recognise that circular economy, the transition to a circular economy, is essential to achieving their decarbonisation aims. And once it's in the NDC, what we want to see is decarbonisation roadmaps. So we've recently produced a decarbonisation roadmap for global healthcare, for example. We've previously produced one for the UK built environment. But sort of working sector by sector, if we have a science-based target for each sector, then we can use circular economy as our inspiration or our set of tools that enables us to identify the interventions that will get us to those decarbonisation milestones in the time available, the time we have left, the shrinking time that we have left. So very much decarbonisation is the what. What do we need to do? Circular economy is the how. How do we rewire our businesses and manage resources differently to achieve those aims? And the sort of final point I wanted to open with is that in order to get there, once we have the plan in place, once we have the picture and the route map, we need to start taking action, of course, and we do that by gearing funding. So the public sector can be a leader in this. They can start to invest, they can demonstrate the direction of travel, and that will gear the private sector, the businesses that I'll talk a little bit more later about, gear investment from them to sort of start to drive the rapid scaling and rapid adoption of circular economy principles that we would like to see.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard. And we should also be joined online by Mariana. I don't know if you can hear us. Perfect.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. So Mariana works for the Government Office for Development and the European Cohesion Policy in Slovenia. She has been working in the area of circular economy since 2010 and was also project coordinator in several projects in circular economy. So welcome Mariana to the panel, and great to have you in the event today.
Thank you for having me. I'm greeting all that are on site, and maybe next time we will be together there. So what I would like to say is that Slovenia has prepared in 2017 our national development strategy, where low carbon and circular is one of the objectives. And we realized then that it's really very challenging on how to tackle this issue, because it is in a way horizontal and vertical. That's why we started 1 year later to collaborate with Climate Kick, EAT Raw Materials, and BRC on thinking how we could really approach this challenge in a systemic manner. And we started the journey very slowly as the 3 ministries, offices, and then we, along the way, other ministries have joined. And the idea is that we are now, we have developed the project with Climate Kick and the other partners on systemic transition into the circular economy. Project consists of 9 programs and 9 horizontal and 3 horizontal programs addressing education, which means young generation, addressing regions, addressing SMEs, and in particular value chains. And also we want to tackle the issue of funding so that we are streamlining the funds towards the project that are actually delivering the transition. And this is really a very challenging and very systemic approach. We are going to embark on the learning journey because we want to do portfolio approach and we want to learn by doing. And by learning, we want to also modify what we are doing. That's basically the idea. And what I've heard today, since now, I think that there are really very a lot of synergies of what the other actors are doing. And I think that networking and building from the projects that are already existing elsewhere would be really great. For example, we have value chain approach on food. We heard the examples we have in forestry and wood chain. We heard the examples. We have construction, building. We have heard the examples. So pulling all these strings together also from the knowledge that is building up in the other stakeholders elsewhere in Europe, I think that can also inform what we will be delivering in this big project.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for introducing that perspective. So for all of those of you in the audience following us in person and online, you will have a chance to ask questions via Slido. We should be able to see the code now on the screen. Perfect. So if you would like to ask any questions to our speakers, you go on slido.com, and then using the code COP26 side events, you'll be able to access the Glasgow side where you'll be able to ask questions, introduce comments. So I highly encourage you to do so, and we'll move on to those questions in a moment. But before we do so, we talked quite a lot today about the role of young people, youth organizations. Mary also mentioned that in her intervention. So I wanted to ask Andrea, how do you think we can ensure that those voices of the young generations and really future generations as well are incorporated properly in the design and implementations of those strategies? And how can we bring them really together into that circular economy and climate nexus?
This is what the project CEU is studied for. The idea is to create what we have to do in Europe, but it should be really useful to have this kind of conduct in all over the world, is to create bottom-up forums, youth forum and youth council, and to bring together young people and policymakers to create bridges, not walls, between politicians and young people. In this way, it is possible to make the voice of young people louder, and that voice cannot be ignored anymore at that point.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So speaking about engaging different stakeholders and really ensuring that we have that support from different sides, Richard, I would love to hear from you a little bit more about, what can really be done to support and engage the business community in that transition. And maybe you could give us some concrete examples from the construction and the built environment sector.
Yeah, thanks, Agata. I mentioned earlier that sort of a few perspectives how public policy needs to respond to this imperative to transition to circularity. But thinking at it from sort of a construction sector, real estate sector, value chain perspective, what systemic change means literally is that every actor has a role. And some of the work that we've done, we've talked to sort of built environment stakeholders, more than 100 from across Europe, and really found that everyone acknowledged they had a role, but they kind of understood that maybe someone else should act first, or they need an enabler from somebody to act. And our message very clearly from Arup and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is that everyone has a role. And part of the work that we're doing through that strategic partnership then is to try and foster that this understanding of circular economy as a means to decarbonisation in the sector through a theory of change that covers sort of a few different 6 different areas. The first, of course, is investment. I mentioned earlier, acknowledging that sort of construction clients, asset owners, people who are sort of responsible for buildings, need to understand the business case for adopting circularity. Otherwise, they're just not going to be able to take those steps internally. The second is coalition. We've mentioned collaboration. We've mentioned engagement with stakeholders. How do we bring people from across the value chain together, from investment funds through demolition and deconstruction contractors, to start to take buildings apart rather than smashing them up? Learning. Built environment. We do not have time necessarily to just wait for people who are being educated now to join the workforce. So we also need to be thinking about existing professionals. How are they going to be rewiring, retooling themselves to fuel this transition? Policy I've mentioned. I'm just going to add a little bit more on that, just to sort of say that policymakers can make better buying decisions, adopt sort of supply chain charters or different procurement methods for doing things, buying services rather than products. They can really be a leader in demonstrating and creating the demand to the private sector that then other actors can follow. Secondly, penultimately, communication. We're only going to transition if everybody knows about it. And still we find, throughout our value chain, throughout the stakeholder groups that we're talking to, people not fully aware, either thinking that decarbonisation and circular economy are separate agendas, which they are not, or either just sort of not really being totally sure what the concept is, finding it difficult to get their head around. And we really need to be able to be clear in our communication as to what it is that we're trying to achieve and how circular economy can help us get there. And finally, designers. Arup is a design firm. We design buildings, we design cities, we design products. And we've produced with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation a design building toolkit, a circular building design toolkit that we are launching at COP in a couple of days. That is really going to provide that sort of central place for designers to find resources for all different stages of a sort of a building life cycle, find the resources that they need to embed circularity in their assets and projects.
Thanks a lot, Richard. It's really interesting to hear because it really is a broader societal effort for us to, within that circular economy transition, to bring in the different elements like education, like communications, and so on. And it's great to hear also from you being very specific about the kind of steps that we need to really use circular economy as a tool to decarbonize. So let's look at the questions from the audience now. You could ask the questions via Slido. If you still want to ask questions via Slido, you should be able to do so using the COP26 side events. And we should be having those in right now. Okay, looks like we're still waiting for the questions to connect to the server, but then maybe a question from my side then on really the idea that measures that are needed to achieve that circular economy transition will inevitably cost money and will require that investment, and that kind of bring that risk of increasing societal inequalities between those who really have those financial capacities and those who have much less financial capacity. So I'm wondering, maybe this is a great question for Mariana, actually. How do you see the role of the governments, and what kind of instruments can we bring really to bridge that gap?
Yes, of course. I think that is really the challenge, because environmental measures can have social implications for sure, and they are usually regressive. So that's why I think we need to look at the solutions at the systemic level. And we heard before, I think the first speaker mentioned, for example, environmental harmful subsidies. So I think that there are a lot of a lot of room for us to really check also where the obstacles or barriers are to stimulate environmentally less damaging activities versus those who are now in place. And the money that could be then released from that could actually be devoted to the measures that could maybe alleviate the potentially more social or could affect the socially vulnerable more. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities, but we need to really look at them at the systemic level, and fiscal, and then of course also social systems need to be adjusted.
Thank you so much, Mariana, and also really for highlighting that role of systemic changes and not just looking at one element or one aspect of the problem, but really looking at systemic solutions. So I see now we have a question from the audience, and I'm going to ask each one of you maybe in a minute to share your views. So the question is, how do you view the circular economy's potential of its core principles, reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle, to move to a post-growth paradigm? And such an interesting question. So Andrea, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. I think that circular economy will be central in the future for a post-growth paradigm to move to a post-growth paradigm. We need to give people more awareness in order to have a better understanding of circular economy. And I also think that principles like reduce, reuse, repair, recycle are really inside young people, but even the majority of people that are not younger anymore. But the point is that awareness is central in this. Sometimes we behave in this way autonomously, but what if we are also aware of what is recycling or what is circular economy? At that point, we really can change things.
Thank you, Andrea. So, Richard, you talked before about decarbonizing, but obviously when we talk about circular economy, there isn't enough attention given to that reduce element. So really looking also at dematerializing. And I'm very curious actually to hear, from that perspective of business and built environment, what are your thoughts also on that potential to move to a post-growth paradigm?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Agatha. I mean, our theory of change very explicitly acknowledges a supply side and a demand side to the problem. So a lot of what you might read around COP is really focused on the supply side solutions. How do we decarbonize energy? How do we decarbonize the production of steel or cement or whatever? But in the time that we have available to us, it's clear that that supply side only is not enough. We need the demand side responses. And that's why we need to engage the whole value chain, because if you need a demand side response, if the people buying the services, buying the products from the manufacturers are not buying them in a different way, the demand is still there, and that will be met through more consumption and more production. So our model, our approach is to say, well, let's engage the business models need to change from the demand side as well as the supply side. So we are buying differently, we're buying products, we're buying services, not products, we're reusing and reducing, and that will really help us sort of decouple the growth from the resource consumption, which is one of the core definitions of circular economy.
So would you say then that on the demand side is really much more due to up to individuals and consumers to reduce their consumption, or are there also any systemic changes or policies that can be introduced on that?
It can reduce if you choose to reduce, but I think it's also about consuming smarter, consuming differently. I think in the Portuguese example, one of our earlier presentations, it was mentioned that the construction strategy involved sharing buildings, having multi-use buildings. Our buildings stand, particularly now post-pandemic, many of our buildings are standing empty most of the time. If they were owned differently, if the models and the contracts and things around them were different, if the architecture of them was different, could they be put to multiple uses or create value for multiple stakeholders rather than just one at the moment? I think those are the kind of demand side strategies we need to look at that complements the innovation that we see around bio-based materials designed for deconstruction, engineered timber, and other more material-focused innovations.
Thanks a lot, Richard. So let me move on to Mariana. I would also love to hear from you on this potential of circular economy to move to the post-growth paradigm.
Yeah, I think the circular economy actually is, I would say, at the heart of moving towards that shift. But I think that we need to be also realistic and see that we really need to have a behavior change at all levels. That's why I think that what previous speaker said, that addressing the entire value chain is really essential, because I think that the value chain itself, or the companies, need to find the new sources of value added which are not necessarily linked to the use of a material. And I think that is really where I would say the challenge is, because it could well happen that we would have more products which are recycled, but that could not necessarily or need to really the paradigm shift. So I think that is really where behavior change and levers for us at the policy level is to think about how we can really stimulate that change that would actually lead us towards less growth intensive work.
Thank you very much, Mariana, and also to Richard and Andrea for joining us today in the panel discussion. So just to be conscious of time, let me move on now to our final remarks and the final speaker for today's session. So we have now been joined by Dr. Florica Fink-Hoyer, who will deliver the closing remarks. Florica is the Director General for Environment in the European Commission and is responsible for implementing the environmental strands of the European Green Deal. So Florica will outline these crucial nexus between climate and circular economy, and really that role in achieving climate neutrality. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to close this session, because I'm a very strong believer in circular economy. It's of course a professional default, because my department is responsible for at least launching the way for the regulatory approaches, and obviously also for the financing behind. And we actually realize that what we are talking about is a new industrial revolution. It is a very new way of consuming and producing, and it will take time. It's not going quickly. But I'm very pleased that we have here a circular economy talk here in Glasgow. So thank you very much for the organizers. We have a series of these talks, but I think it's important also for once to look at the impact of circularity and circular economy on climate neutrality, something which is not always looked at. We often look at more on biodiversity, nature, and the resource extraction side. So very good. And here in COP, normally we go for the classical diplomacy approaches and for cooperation, but I think it's extremely useful also to look at very concrete examples. What can we do on the ground? How to operationalize all of this? And I think this is what the circular economy is about. And we do have, and we have heard that there's strong evidence of the strategic role of circularity can play in this transformative, regenerative economy. I'm not sure whether it was said already, but half of the total greenhouse gas emissions come from resource extraction and processing. So clearly there is a huge potential on reducing also carbon emissions. And we actually also know that it happens to be one of the most cost-effective solutions. So I think that also should spur that circle. So far, and quite rightly so, a lot has been always looked at when you talk about reducing carbon emission. You look at transition to renewable energy and on energy efficiency. And actually the role of circularity has been a little bit overlooked, if I may say so. We have our European Environmental Agency, and they are really science-based, so it's not me telling you that, it is them. But they said that the circular economy can cut greenhouse gas emissions by 61%, obviously in the construction sector, which we have heard already, and the building sector. Why that? Because it's a very carbon-intense sector, but also one which is not going to stop, but it will probably go differently. And I'm very pleased to hear when you talk about products as a service, because that's actually what we are looking at as well. And you know, we have the Bauhaus initiative, the European Bauhaus initiative, where all these ideas will also fly. Now, we also obviously can look on reducing actually the impact of climate adaptation, but also on resilience building when we just reduce the level of water we use or other commodities that we use, and so on, and also in regenerative agriculture, forestry. But when we came out with our and we have already two EU circular economy action plans, where we really tried to look at how to reduce EU's carbon material footprint, but also the material use rate. I mean, this is really going hand in hand together. And actually, hopefully by the end of the year, we will put forward what we call a sustainable products initiative. Will be, I always call it like the mother of all the mothers of this legislation, but it's a framework on where we go. Actually, I think it was said already on the design phase. We start with the design phase. How can we make a product along the whole value chain, but also from the design, reusable, more longer durability, repairability, upgradability, all these principles that are really part of the regenerative economy, and by the way, would also help a little bit on addressing the second question, which we didn't address, but the fairness issue. But I think today it would be much more fairer to go for ensuring repairability than just buying new. Now, we have heard few examples, and I think I don't have to go further, but we will look, when we put out this framework on how to ensure and regulate the use of carbon, the carbon footprint, the environmental footprint, which is much further than just carbon, but also, as I said, ensure that these principles are embedded from the start in the production process, and then allow also a different consumer process, especially with recyclabilities. But take one example, textile. A very hugely, carbon intense, but also polluting industry, if I may say so, but it will not go away. But if we were just using the garment twice, it would cut emissions by 49%, so almost half. And there are a lot of initiatives coming up which look at that. So what we will do, we come out with this sustainable product framework, and then we will roll it out into different sectors of industry. Those sectors which have the highest possibility of recyclability or of circularity, but also then which are very carbon intense. So this is steel, cement, the building sector, has been said a lot of times, furniture, textile, aluminium, chemicals, food, water, nutrition, basically a lot of the sectors where also Europe is very strong, but others are very strong, but we need to really make that future-proof, and that means we also have to go towards a regenerative economy. So this is where we are looking at, and I think we need to step up really much more these synergies and this collaboration, be it with achieving circularity, but also climate neutrality, but also biodiversity, halting biodiversity loss. And we look at new models to measure that, because what measures gets done, modeling, policy tools. The most important part is that we understand that all of us can play a role. Obviously, industry, the investors, the public authorities, and I would not single out use, because for me, use is part of those who provide the solution. So I hate when people say, oh, and then use. No, you have already the proposals, you are already in the business, and that's exactly what we need and what I count on, and we all count on, because that's our common future. But we really need co-creation and awareness rising, obviously, but I'm quite sure that industry and business and consumers will over time move into that, because that's the only way for us. So I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to close it, and I hope we will have many other circular economy talks. This is just a part in the series, and thank you for the organizers, for moderators, for everybody who participated, also online, and thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Florica, and also to all those who join us today online and in person. I do also hope that we will have more space and more platforms to talk about circular economy in the climate discussions. So enjoy your day, whether you're in Glasgow or whether you're home or anywhere else, and see you next time.